What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to learn to use the Google Places services to search for locations in your app. So this is pretty cool, and also how Google Maps and a bunch of apps work. So we've got a map here with a nice search bar. So if I go ahead and start typing in, let's say, Manhattan, you'll see that we get really accurate results, and it actually filters from the topmost results of something generic like a city to an address. So if I go ahead and start typing in maybe like Apple Park, you can see that it can actually pick up specific things like Apple Park Cupertino. And when I go ahead and tap on it, it'll actually zoom us in, it'll add a map pin there, and it looks really nice. So we'll take a look at implementing this from scratch using some of the Google offered frameworks and all that good stuff. So a bit of a longer video today, but if that sounds good, make sure you start by destroying the like button down below. Hit subscribe while you're at it, and if you haven't done so already. That said, let's get into the video. All right, we're gonna go ahead and get started by opening up Xcode and creating a new project. We're gonna stick with the app template under iOS, and let's go ahead and give this project a name of perhaps YouTube Maps. Make sure your language here is set to Swift, your lifecycle is UIKit, and your interface is Storyboard. Go ahead and continue, save the project wherever you'd like. And first things first, we want to build out the basic UI where we can see a map as well as a search bar before we bring in all of the magic fancy Google searching stuff. So let's jump into our view controller and let's build that stuff out. So it's pretty simple actually. What we're going to want in here is a map, and then we're also going to leverage a search controller. So the first thing we're going to do is import mapkit. And let's go ahead and create a map. So I'm just going to say map view is going to be mk map view, just like that. We're going to go ahead and add this as a sub view like that. And we also want to go ahead and override view did layout sub views, call super view did layout sub views, and give this map a frame. So map view.frame will be view.bounds. Now, before we go ahead and give this a run, let's also jump into our main.storyboard here, and we're just going to embed this view controller into a navigation controller. You can do it programmatically also. We'll just stick through storyboard for the sake of time. So we'll go to editor, embed in navigation controller, which gives us this navigation bar up here. We can select it and go ahead and check this box for prefers large titles, and that's fairly self-explanatory. Jump back into your view controller, and let's go ahead and give this a title of perhaps maps. And now that you have that, let's go ahead and select a simulator from our nice and long list here. We'll go with the 12 Pro Max and go ahead and give it a run. And we expect to see basically our title and a map view. Now, while that is building and running over here, we now need to add a search controller so we can see a search bar at the top here. So hopefully my simulator decides to load momentarily, and then we'll get to that piece. I should also mention I've got opened up here the Google Places SDK reference. It's kind of a guide how to implement it. We're going to do it together, but if you guys want to Google it just for sake of reference. But here is our map as well as our navigation bar up here. So let's go ahead and create a search controller. So we want to declare it right up here. I'm going to say our search VC is going to be a UI search view controller. All right, we want a UI search controller with a results controller. So we want this one here. Now, what's our results controller going to be? Now, we want to create a new view controller here. So I'm going to create a new file. It'll be a Cocoa Touch class. It's going to inherit from UI view controller. And basically, this is going to be the controller that is responsible for showing our location predictions once we hook up the Google search. So go ahead and create it. Save it in the defaults location. You can get rid of this commented out stuff, and for the time being, just go ahead and set a background color in here to be system blue so we can actually see something going on, and we can jump back to our view controller. Now this parameter will just be an instance, just like that. And now that we've got this property created here, we can go ahead and say navigation item dot search controller is going to be our search VC, which we've declared right up above. I'm also going to go ahead and assign the results updater on here, which is going to be a protocol that we'll conform to. If you take a look, it's UI search results updater. So I'll go ahead and say self, and we want to make sure we conform to UI search results updater, just like that, or updating, I should say. That'll give you an error. We can go ahead and hit fix, and it'll bring in the single required function that I'll go ahead and move down here. So go ahead and give that a run, and let's make sure we're seeing our search bar at the top now, which we are. The problem is it's overlapping our map, so we need to fix up our map layout here. So we're going to go ahead and say 0 from X. The top will be view.safe_area_insets.top. The width will be the entire width of the frame, and this will be the entire height subtracting the safe area insets.top. I'll also go ahead and give the search bar a background color. So we'll go ahead and say get the search bar from the search VC, and we're going to set a background color, and this will just be a system background color. You can also go with something like secondary system background. I won't fuss with it too much since it's a little subjective. Let's make sure everything is looking all right, and then we'll move on. All right, so looking pretty good. We've got a search bar here. We've got a map. I can throw this into dark mode. It looks a little nicer. And when we tap on this, we see that things are going to start to move. But you know, like we're not going to see any results quite yet. Once we start searching, we'll see them. So let's hook up that search. So the first thing we want to do to hook up that search is actually stop running this and close Xcode. We want to go ahead and open up Terminal since we're going to bring in a dependency for Google Places via CocoaPods. We want to go ahead and cd into the project and run pod init. This is going to initialize CocoaPods. If you see an error here along the lines of pod commands not found, that means you don't have CocoaPods installed. You can do a quick Google search how to do that. After that, you want to go ahead and open up the pod file that I created. Now we're going to bring in a single pod here, so let's go ahead and delete this. And the pod we're going to bring in is super creatively called Google Places. Now just kidding, that's not creative at all. And the version number that is the latest at the moment is 420. Go ahead and lowercase that p. And we can go ahead and do a pod install. Now when we run pod install, it'll bring in Google Places and any relevant dependencies. So while it's doing that, we can actually jump on over here to the reference for all this Google Places stuff, and we do need to set up a few things. On the left-hand side, I'm going to click this Setup in Cloud Console. Basically, we need to set up a Google Cloud project. Think of this as similar to setting up a Firebase project. So I've already created one, but you can create this project pretty simply by hitting this big blue button. It'll ask you for a project name, etc., etc. So we're not going to do this. But if you continue down, it'll basically now tell you to enable billing. Now you get a free trial and you don't have to enable automatic billing, but you do need to just enable, a billing account. But the next thing we want to do, which is pretty important, which a lot of people forget, is go ahead and hit that blue button under Enable APIs. And what this is going to do is this is going to bring you to a page that looks like this. Take note of your project up here in this dropdown. Mine is called iOS Academy. But what we want to do in here is we want to find the Places API, which is this guy right here. We're going to click into it, and you can see a description, get detailed information about 100 million places right here. But we want to hit this big blue Enable button. And what this will allow us to do is when we use the API key in here, we can actually use the Places API, of course, with the free trial. So once you've enabled it, you'll see everything refresh, and it tells you, if you have any traffic to this API, but nothing else left to do here. So we can once again come back here and continue down here. The next thing we want to do is actually get a API key. So on the left-hand side, I'm going to hit Using API Keys. We get, once again, this big blue button. We can click it, kind of hard to miss. And you're going to be brought to a screen for your credentials, as Google likes to call it. And the first thing we want to do is select our project, so iOS Academy. And then up here, there is this plus button where we can say Create Credential, and we're going to say Create an API Key. And this is the key we're going to need, so we can hit this Copy button, and now we can go back to Xcode. So once the terminal is done installing your dependencies, you can go ahead and close terminal. And we're going to open up our project folder again. And now we're going to jump into our workspace. And we're just going to build everything. So we're going to select the same simulator and just hit the run button. Once you've installed a CocoaPod, things are a little slower to build since you're building more dependencies. So just be patient here. And actually looks like it was fairly quick, which is nice. But now what we can do is we can use Google Places within our application. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is we are going to create a manager which is responsible for actually looking up places. So let's create a new Swift file. I'm going to go ahead and call this Google Places Manager, just like that. And let's go ahead and create this. So first things first, let's create the class. So we'll say Google Places Manager. We're going to have a shared instance of it. So we're going to use it as a singleton. We're going to want to privatize the initializer. And let's see what else we want to go ahead and do. The other thing we want to go ahead and do in here, of course, is import Google Places. We're going to want to get the client for Google Places. So I'm going to say client is GMS Places client. And we're going to say .shared. So Google also gives you a shared instance. And the first thing that we want to add in here, function-wise, is something called setup. And this setup function is going to basically allow us to provide our API key to the client. So we're going to say provide our API key, and we're going to paste in what we copied from the Google dashboard. So cool, where do we actually start calling this stuff from? So now what we can do is in our app delegate, as soon as the application launches in this function, we're going to say Google Places Manager shared, and we are going to say set up just like that. And that'll go ahead and configure our API key. Now that we've done that, the next thing we want to actually do is hook up getting places. So when I tap into this, we want to do two things. The first thing we want to do is we want to get every single time the user presses a keyboard key, and we want to use it to show predictions of what location they're typing in. So what we want to do is basically build an autocomplete functionality. So let's add a function here. So I'm going to go ahead and say public func find places. Now find places is going to take in a query string, and it's going to have a completion handler that is going to return to us basically the results. If it succeeds, it'll give us an array of array of strings, I should say. Otherwise, it'll give us a error back. And this whole thing returns void. So let's go ahead and implement this. It's fairly straightforward, so just bear with me here. So now what we want to go ahead and do, let me go ahead and line break this. Now what we want to go ahead and do is basically say client, and we want to perform a autocomplete. So we can say find autocomplete predictions. And we want to pass in a particular query here, which is a string. We're going to create a filter in a moment here. The session token is nil, and then we're going to have a callback. So let's talk about this filter thing. So we want to filter on the basis of a geocode. So we're going to go ahead and say let filter is going to be a GMS autocomplete filter, just like that. And now we can say filter.type is going to be geocode. And once we get this completion handler here, you'll see that we get an array of predictions that is optional. So I'm going to go ahead and we can call this perhaps results, and we'll get an error optional as well. So the first thing we wanted to go ahead and do is unwrap all of this stuff. So we'll say guard let results equals results, and error equals nil. Otherwise, we can go ahead and return. And here we'll say results. And now that we have these results, we can actually go and convert them to the strings that we want. So bear with me while we resolve all these errors here. So let's see, we can delete that opening parenthesis to get rid of that error there. And we've got this warning here because we're not using results. But basically, we can convert the results to the strings of the names of the places we found. However, using strings isn't really great, right? We probably want to use a model. It's probably the more appropriate way to handle this. So let's go ahead and create a model up here. So I'm going to create a model called the place. It's going to have a name. and it's also going to have a identifier. So let's go ahead and create an identifier on here. And what we can go ahead and say now is that this function returns an array of places, upon success. So if we have failed here, we can go ahead and say completion is a failure. And we need to provide an error here. So I'm going to go ahead and create a custom error enum in here. So we're going to say places error is of type error. And the only case we'll have in here is failed to find. And now what we can do in the failure here is say places error dot failed to find. And otherwise, what we want to do is we want to use the results to create an array of place models. So we're going to say places is going to be an array of place objects. So we're going to say results.compactMap, and we're going to create a place with each of these. So we can say place is going to have a name and an identifier. And let's go ahead and figure this out. So we're going to say $0, and we want to find the attributed full text, and from this we can go ahead and get the title, is I believe what it's called. So let's see what properties they expose here. So there is a string, so we can actually just use the string here, and in this case we can use perhaps the place ID, which is also a string. So now that we've created the places here, we can simply call the completion handler, passing in success and our array of places. So that's actually all we need to do to look up those places. We'll need to do one more thing to select that place and show it on the map, but let's go ahead and actually hook this up to our UI. So back in our view controller, we added this result updater protocol, and it gives us this function here. So what we need to now do is basically get the query text out of the search controller. So we'll say our query is going to be search controller.searchbar.text. And once we've actually gotten that, we also want to make sure that the query trimming all the white spaces is not empty, because we don't want to search for an empty string. And if we've actually gone ahead and done that, we can go ahead and call our API. So to call our API, we're going to say Google Places Manager shared, and we're going to say go ahead and find all the places for this query and give us a result back. And once we have the result back here, what we can go ahead and do is switch on it. There will be a success case, which will give us an array of places back. And for now, we're just going to start by printing it. And if we get a failure, we'll have an error, and we'll go ahead and print that as well. Now, of course, we're not just going to print it. We're going to be showing it in our actual results controller, but just for the sake of getting this up and running, let's go ahead and just print it. So let me go ahead and build and run this again. Let me also expand our console here, and let's see what's going on. It looks like we are already crashing. So let's see what the heck is going on in the console down here. So this is saying GMS places being initialized before this is actually set up, which makes sense. We need to call this setup function before this is created here. So what I can actually go ahead and do is let's move this API providing call into the app delegate directly. So I'm going to go ahead and close that. Let's stop running the app. Let's jump back into the app delegate, and instead of calling setup here, we can go ahead and put that there directly. And just remember, you need to go ahead and import Google Places. Let's try that one more time. So now the API key should be provided before any of its APIs are used, so it's not crashing now, which is looking great. And let's try to search for a place, and let's see if it actually shows up. So I'm going to go ahead and search for, let's go ahead and search for maybe something in Manhattan. So I'll search for Manhattan, and we can see we're actually getting an array of a ton of different results here. We're getting places. This first place here is Manhattan, New York. It has the associated identifier, so this is looking awesome. We just now need to actually plumb those results into our blue results controller now. So let's jump into our results controller. And basically, to show this list of alerts, or list of places, I should say, it's pretty simple. We basically just want to use a table view. So we're going to create a table view. It's going to be of type UI table view, of course. We're going to want to create it in here and register a pretty basic cell. Now you can customize the cell and go crazy. We're just going to use a pretty vanilla table view cell today, since it's not really the point today to customize it. We also want to make sure we are conforming to the table view's delegate as well as its data source. We'll go ahead and add this as a sub view and assign its delegate and data source properties. Let's go ahead and do that. We no longer want this to be blue because it's a little ugly, so we'll go ahead and get rid of that. We need to make sure we in fact lay out the table view, so we'll go ahead and assign its frame here to be view.bounds. We also need 3 required table view functions, so we'll say number of rows. This is going to be places.count, and places is basically going to be a private var, which will just be an array of place models, which we will actually get back from the API that we're calling already. We're also going to want self row add index path. In here, we're going to go ahead and dequeue a table view cell from the identifier we registered. So we'll say dequeue reusable cell with an ID. We'll go ahead and return the cell here. And here, we're just going to set the place's name as the text for the text label. So we'll go ahead and say indexpath.row.name. And the final function we'll want to hook up is did select row add index path. So when we select one of these places, we not only want to get rid of the particular results we're seeing, but we'll want to go ahead and show that particular place on the map. So we'll go ahead and say true, and we'll handle this in a moment. So let's go ahead and see how we hook up this results controller back in our view controller. So assuming we've called this function and we've gotten some results back, we've got an array of places here, and now what we want to do is on the main thread, we want to pass this into our results controller to be shown. Now to get the results controller out is pretty simple actually. What we can do up here is we can say results VC is the search controller dot search results controller as our results VC, or our results view controller is what we called it. And now that we've had this results VC up here, we can go ahead and call a function on it. So we can say update with places. Now we haven't created this update function, so let's come back here and rather come back to the results controller and add that API here. So I'm going to go ahead and say public func update with places, which will be an array of place models. And we should try to spell that correctly since that's kind of important. And here we can say self.places is places. Keep in mind, self.places is just an array of place models. And this should be places, plural. And then we can just go ahead and say table view, go ahead and reload yourself since we should now have places. So let's go ahead and run this and let's see what happens. We should expect to see a list of the places. I'm going to start typing in London and I'm not seeing it, which is not cool. So let's see what gives. So we're saying self for row. We're saying number of rows in section. This is all looking good. We're setting a frame for our table view, which is looking good as well. I see the divider lines here. So let's go ahead and see. Let me go ahead and print in here the places.count that we are getting, just to make sure that that function is being called to narrow down the problem. So we'll start typing in London. So it looks like we're not actually calling that yet. So let's jump back to our view controller. And let's see, it looks like we aren't even coming into here yet. So I'm going to print out in here, found results. Let's go ahead and give that a run. And let's see, we might be failing at that guard statement we modified up above, which it looks like we are. So let's see what's going on. We're saying results VC is search controller dot search results. This should be search results controller, not updater. And now everything should be all right. So silly little typo there. Go ahead and try that again. And we're going to start typing in perhaps London. And look at that, boom, we've got our results showing up. And let's type in a longer address. So let's say we wanted like, I don't know, Orlando, or we can type in Orlando, or we can type in Berlin. Basically, this will have you, it'll show you any results, just like the Google Maps app. So this is looking pretty cool. So there's a couple things we need to now do. The first one being, when I type in something here, we get these results, but when I tap on one of them, something should happen, of course, and right now nothing is happening. The other issue is when we go into search, the map should probably like move up or take up the majority of the space, because right now we just see this empty space, so it's a tad bit ugly. So there's a variety of ways you can go ahead and fix this. The simplest one is probably using constraints. You can also go ahead and assign this to be the entirety of the screen. So we can go ahead and say view.bounds like we did in the beginning. If we take a look at running that and see what it looks like, that's what we get. So if we actually get rid of that large title look in our storyboard, the title won't overlap, so it won't look as strange. But once again, I'm not going to spend too much time here for the sake of this being a little subjective to your application's design. But let's go ahead and give this a run one more time, and let's see what that looks like. This one will end up looking better, except we need a bar color now, so I'll just undo that for the time being and jump back here and undo this as well. So cool, so now let's talk about the last piece here, which is when we select one of the autocomplete search results that we get from Google, we want to actually show it on the map with a pin. So it's pretty simple to actually do that. Now in our results controller, we're getting the tapped table view here, the cell that we tap. So what we can do is we can get the nth place out of the places array. And what we want to go ahead and do is we want to convert this place to a coordinate that we can plot on the map here. So what we want to add to our Google Places Manager is a function to do that. So we have this find places. The next thing we can go ahead and add here is public func resolve location. And this is going to be for a place. So resolve a location for a single place. And once again, this will also need a completion handler. Except this time, the completion handler is going to return to us a CL location. So let's go ahead and import core location up here. And a CL location can encapsulate longitude and latitude. So we'll say here, CL location. If it fails to go ahead and resolve this, we can go ahead and say it gives us an error, and this whole thing is going to go ahead and return void, just like that. Now we can say client. And from this client, we can actually get a particular place. So we can say fetch place for place ID. The place ID is pretty simple. It's place.identifier. That's why we hung on to it earlier. And place fields that we want is the coordinate. That's the only field that we want. The session token, once again, is going to be nil. And then we have a callback here. Now this callback gives us back a particular place information. So we can say, maybe we can call this a Google place, so the naming doesn't actually contradict. And then we also have a error. So next we want to actually unwrap it. So we'll say guard let Google place equals Google place and error equals nil. Else we can go ahead and return. Now we want to actually get the coordinate out. So Google Place dot coordinate actually gives us a object, and there is a longitude as well as a latitude on here. So we'll go ahead and create a core location coordinate. So I'm going to go ahead and say this is a CL location 2D coordinate, or coordinate 2D. This gets created with a latitude and a longitude, like so. Now the latitude is just going to be what we had typed before, except dot latitude, and this one will be dot longitude. And now that we've got this, we can create a location from it. So CL location with a coordinate, and that'll be coordinate, so not coder. We want coordinate, just like that. And we can actually get rid of all of these other initializer parameters. I believe the coordinate is enough, a minimum. And let's see what's going on here. Looks like we had an error. So it looks like actually we need to actually pass in more than just the coordinate. So what I'll actually do is I'll change the actual type of the completion handler to pass back a coordinate 2D. So now what we can do here is we can say completion, pass back success for the given coordinate. And in this guard case, we absolutely want to make sure we're handling failures properly. So we want to pass in a failure. So I'm going to come up here and add a new case, and this will be failed to get coordinates. And now down here in this failure, we can say places error dot fail to get coordinates, just like that. So now we have a function to turn a place back into a coordinate, or to a coordinate, I should say. So down here, we can go ahead and say Google Places Manager shared, and we want to resolve a location for a given place, and this will give us a result back in the completion. Now we need to switch on that result, just like we did in the other API call, and this will give us a coordinate. And for now, we'll just break, and this will go ahead and give us a failure in which we will just print the error. Now, one thing to keep in mind is when we are on our actual search controller, let me just go ahead and run this to get the updated UI. When we're on the search controller and searching for something, one thing that's a little strange is we're actually in this part of the UI. So when we tap on this, we want to get rid of what we're showing here, as well as communicate back to the original controller with the map to plot the actual map pin. So we want to use a delegate to do that. But before we do that, I'm going to come here and also say view.background color is going to be clear. And whenever we tap on one of these results, the other thing that we want to go ahead and also do is get rid of all the places. So we have this place here, but I can go ahead and instead of getting rid of them, we can just say table view dot is hidden is true. And whenever we do update with more places, because we want to unhide it at that point, I would say self.tableview.isHidden is false. And let's go ahead and create the delegate and wrap this whole thing up. So up here, we're going to create a protocol, which will be the same name as the controller, suffixed by a delegate. It's going to extend any object, and this is basically going to have a single function of did tap place with coordinates. So we can actually say did tap place with coordinates, which will basically be the core location type. So we'll go ahead and import core location here, and this will be CL location coordinates 2D. And now what we want to do is have an instance of this delegate. So we're going to say weak var delegate will be our protocol, and in here we can finally go ahead and say delegate. We want to go ahead and call this function with this coordinate. Now there's 2 or 3 things we need to adjust. First of all, we're going to say weak self here, so we can actually retain weak self and not cause a memory leak. And we're also going to call this delegate on the main thread, because as a result of it, we want to go ahead and update our UI. So back in our view controller, what we want to go ahead and do in this results updater function is say results vc dot delegate is going to be self. And let me go ahead and put it down here so it's nice and organized. We're going to add an extension on view controller, and we're going to conform to results view controller delegate. Now this has a single function, did select a place, I believe is what we called it. Let's see, looks like it's not what we called it. I'll go ahead and hit Command B, and the autocomplete here should help me out. Let's go ahead and hit this error and hit fix, and that is the function we added, did tap place. Now once we've tapped onto a place, all we want to do is add a map pin. So the first thing we can go ahead and do, actually before we even add it, is remove all map pins, but let's do that afterward. So how do we create a pin? We're going to say this is a mk point annotation. We want to go ahead and say pin.coordinates will be the coordinates that are passed in. We're going to say map view, add annotation for our pin. And finally, we want to actually animate the map to whatever location we added this pin to. So we're going to say map view, set a region, which will be a mk coordinate region. A region gets created with a couple different parameters. We're going to go with a center and a span. The center will be the coordinate. We want to go ahead and pass in a span here as well, and we're going to say animated true. Now this span is basically how far do you want to zoom into the actual map. So it's going to have a latitude and a longitude delta. So we'll go ahead and say 0.2 perhaps. That's pretty zoomed in. We can adjust that as needed. And let me just go ahead and fix up my indentation here so it stops bothering me. So let's see what we need to fix up. Let me do Control I to make sure it's all aligned. Go ahead and line break that, and that's looking pretty good. So let's go ahead and give this a run. Let's see what final result we get. So bear with my simulator here. I am going to search for Cupertino, California. We'll go ahead and tap it, and boom, look at that. We've moved over there. So one issue I see off the bat is the keyboard didn't go away, so that's not good. To make the keyboard go away, we're going to do two things. So we want to, in this delegate, say search VC dot search bar. I'm going to go ahead and say resign first responder. So let's go ahead and try that one more time. And we should see that the keyboard will go away and everything will animate back. So if I tap on this, maybe type in London, if I can spell it correctly, and tap on it, you'll see that we'll go over there. So we have actually gone ahead and gotten rid of the keyboard, and it's also zoomed in. Now, one other thing you might be wondering is we should probably clear the text in here also. And if actually right now we're not getting rid of the prior pins we've added. So if I go ahead and search for perhaps like Cupertino now, it'll go ahead and move to Cupertino and add a pin there. But if I zoom out of the map by holding Option and just panning here, let's try that one more time. We hit cancel here. Let's try to pan out of this. You'll notice that we'll still have a map pin added in Canada up there. So we want to remove all the other prior pins we've added. So what we can do for that is say, first get all the annotations, which will be map view dot annotations. And we can go ahead and say map view dot remove in annotations, which is an array, which will be annotations just like that. So this will remove any prior annotations the map has on it already. Now we also want to go ahead and cancel the searching here. So I presume the search VC has a dismiss function on here, which it looks like it does. So we can actually say dismiss animated true, and completion is going to be nil. So let's try that one more time. So I'm going to search for, let's go ahead and search for Berlin, perhaps. We'll go ahead and tap on it, and now you see the search actually dismisses, the cancel button goes away, and it puts a pin basically on Berlin. Let's go ahead and search for Tokyo, and boom, we now have Tokyo showing up. So it's looking pretty good. You could go ahead and clear out the search results for a new query, but I'm going to leave it since I think showing the user, what they searched is kind of important. So that's Google Places search in a nutshell. This video has gotten way longer than I thought it would be, but hopefully it's pretty clear. I think the key takeaways here are abstract your search and your results into different controllers. We leverage the Google Places SDK here and services, and we've wrapped it in our own manager to make the interface nice and clean. So just as a recap, we're doing two things here. We're fetching all places autocomplete for a given query, and then we're converting that place to a given field. And we care about the coordinate, which is what we're getting here, but you could get a lot of other info as well. You can get all info, you can get business status, the name, opening hours, just quite a few things you can get. You can even get photos for that particular place. So you're not just limited to coordinates if you want to go exploring into what Google provides. So that is all I've got for you guys today. Hopefully you got a lot out of this video. If you enjoyed it and haven't done so already, definitely smash that like button down below. If you haven't subscribed yet and you're into iOS and Swift, hit subscribe while you're at it. And of course, comment down below with any feedback, questions, video suggestions, or if you just want to say hi. I love hearing from you guys and replying. And we've got a pretty vibrant comment section going on this channel, so definitely don't hesitate to throw something down there if you so choose to. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you in the next video.